In the Imperium of man, there are fates worse than death. To be born a psyker is to scream silently from your first breath, because the universe itself is listening. Every thought you have can become a doorway. Every dream can become a weapon, and every mistake can damn not just you, but entire worlds. This is not a story of heroes clad in shining armor. This is the story of a soul hunted from birth, feared by allies, desired by monsters, and used by an empire that calls its cruelty necessity. If you stay until the end, you will understand why some psykers pray not for salvation, but for annihilation. They knew something was wrong with him before he could speak. The lights flickered when he cried. Shadows bent unnaturally toward his crib. Servitors malfunctioned in his presence, their vox grills stuttering prayers as if afraid. On the hive world of Carthax nigh, such signs meant only one thing: a psyker had been born. His mother named him Calix. She loved him fiercely, desperately, as though love itself could shield him from the truth. But even she flinched when the temperature dropped without reason, when whispers crawled through the walls late at night. She prayed louder than anyone else in their hab block, hoping the Emperor would not notice her son. The Emperor noticed everything. Calix learned early to stay silent, to bury his thoughts, to pretend he was normal while his mind burned with colors no one else could see. He felt emotions that were not his own: fear, rage, hunger, leaking into him from the warp like poison through cracked glass. Sleep was no refuge. Dreams were worse. When the black ships arrived, the sky turned the color of old bruises. Their presence crushed hope without firing a single shot. Aubats came first, then robed figures bearing the sigil of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. They tested children in the streets. Some screamed. Some vanished quietly. Calix tried to run. He did not get far. His mother never screamed when they took him. That hurt more than if she had. She simply collapsed, whispering the Emperor's name over and over, as if begging him to forgive the son he had already condemned. On the black ship, Calix learned the truth of terror. Psykers were chained together like cargo. Some were children. Some were old. Many were already broken. The air was thick with despair and the metallic taste of blood. When one lost control, they were executed immediately, burned, shot, or spaced without ceremony. There were no good psykers, only controlled ones and dead ones. Training was agony disguised as education. They taught him to open his mind just enough to obey, never enough to hope. Those who failed were fed to the warp, or to the Emperor himself. Calix learned that 10,000 psykers died every day to keep the Golden Throne alive. Their souls burned like fuel, and the Imperium called it holy. He survived because he learned to hate himself before anyone else could. Years later, when he was sanctioned and branded with sigils of control, Calix realized the cruel joke of his existence. He was no longer free, but he was no longer allowed to die. He had become useful. Calix thought the black ships were the worst fate imaginable. He was wrong, because survival in the Imperium only means living long enough to suffer more. War gave Calix purpose, or something close to it. He was assigned to an Astra Militarum, regiment on a frontier world already half lost to chaos, Soldiers avoided his gaze. Commissars watched him more closely than the enemy. To them, Calix was not a man. He was a bomb that prayed not to explode. Every battle tore pieces out of his soul. To wield the warp was to invite it inside. Demons clawed at his thoughts, whispering promises of freedom, of peace, of rest. He learned that the warp did not always lie. Sometimes it simply told truths the Imperium refused to acknowledge. During one battle, a possessed officer slaughtered his own squad. Calix reached into the warp and tore the demon out, along with most of the man's mind. When the smoke cleared, hundreds were saved. The commissar thanked him, then ordered the survivor executed for corruption, then reminded Calix that he was only one failed test away from the same fate. That night, Calix wept alone, not because of the killing, but because he felt the demon's fear as it died. Even monsters screamed when they were afraid. As the campaign dragged on, Calix began protecting the soldiers who once feared him. He absorbed psychic backlash meant for others. He burned his own mind to shield theirs. Slowly, the regiment stopped seeing him as a curse and began seeing him as a guardian. That scared him more than their hatred ever had. Because heroes are remembered, weapons are replaced. When chaos finally broke through the defenses, Calix understood what he had always been preparing for. The voices in the warp roared. Reality thinned. A greater demon pushed its way into the world, ripping apart tanks and men alike. Calix stepped forward. He could have let go. He could have embraced the warp fully and become something terrible and eternal. It would have been easy. Instead, he chose sacrifice. He opened his mind just enough to destroy the demon and burned everything else away. Memories, pain, hope, self. The warp screamed as it was denied its prize. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. Calix still stood, barely. The Inquisition arrived days later. They praised his service. They declared him too unstable to be risked again. As protocol demanded, they prepared to end him. But one soldier, someone Calix had saved, stood between him and the firing squad. Then another. Then dozens. Men and women who were alive because a Psyker had chosen them over himself. For a moment, the Imperium hesitated. Calix was taken away, not to be executed, but to serve again, forever. His reward for heroism was more suffering. As he was led into the darkness, Calix smiled, not because he was happy, but because he finally understood. He was not horrifying because he was a psyker. He was horrifying because, in a galaxy built on cruelty, he still chose compassion. In Warhammer 40,000, there is no mercy, no peace, no happy ending promised. But the story of a psyker is not just one of horror. It is one of endurance. To live feared, to serve hated, to sacrifice without recognition, and yet to still choose humanity. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, the most terrifying thing of all is not the warp, not chaos, not even death. It is hope that refuses to die.